It is time to begin seeking excellence.
All right, so today we're talking about what it means to lead as a man. I think that so often in the church we hear this: men, you're supposed to pursue; men, you're supposed to lead; men are supposed to be leaders of the home, leaders of the family. I love it. I think it's so true, but I think it's often not given in a practical way. There's no practical explanation of it. So today I've asked a number of my Instagram followers for their input on this and have done some research and some surveys and things like that, some polls on Instagram, asking questions like, is the husband the head of the wife? In a Christian marriage, who gets the final say? Does the Bible teach mutual submission between spouses, that the wife should submit to the husband or vice versa? And so I haven't left them up long enough to give the full breakdown. So I'll be doing some of that next week, getting into some of the details from that and some of my thoughts coming from the Ortega's podcast. So I'm recording with To Become Family. By the time this comes out on Locals, it'll be released on the day that I am recording with him. And when this comes out on the podcast, it'll be a couple days after that episode is released. So I encourage you to check that out if you haven't already. I'm super excited to talk with them about all these different topics. This is something I think about and talk about often, as you know. And I'm really fired up today because I've been thinking about this a lot, and I think that's a really important topic. And so I'm excited to get into some of my definitions and understanding of this. Kind of is just generally what it means to be a man, but I'm specifically going to talk about what it means to lead. So what does it mean for a man to lead? When we hear this all the time, what does it mean? Well, we're about to figure out. We're about to discuss that. So let's get into it. All right. So that little quote from Ryan, I think, is very, very revealing and very, I just think it explains a lot. I think that I've seen a reel recently that had that quote, and it was like, this is what Christian women often seem like, right? This idea of lead me, I want to be led. Men are supposed to be leaders, all these different things. We don't have men that'll step up and lead. I heard this for so long. Where are all the good men? I know so many good single women. Where are all the good men at? And I've already gotten into this in the last couple of weeks. Where are all the good men, the dating episode, all that fun stuff. We've dove into that topic. But today I want to talk about specifically, what does this actual leadership mean? And I think first we have to decide if this is what we actually want. And this maybe is like the portion of the talk where I'm going to be addressing you ladies, is if you want to be led. You can't do this Ryan bullshit. It can't be, like, don't boss me around, but lead me when I'm in the mood to be led. Like, this is what I feel like a lot of low-key feminist women want today, is they want to be led, but then anytime you have an experience of being led, it's problematic. It's an issue. It's causes a rift, right? There's tension. And so I think this is something we have to think about, we have to consider as a society, as a group of people, as a church, is if this is true, that men are supposed to lead, we have to start setting them up for success. Because I think it's been a long time of not setting men up for success and expecting something of them that they're incapable of giving to us. And so I want to read this, just a small portion of the Abolition of Man. Sorry if I double dip, because I've thought about reading it on a different podcast. So if I said it already, forgive me, but I want to read just this quick excerpt from C.S. Lewis's The Abolition of Man. I think this applies super well to the current situation of feminism, how it's infiltrated the church in many ways, and just kind of the current situation around masculinity in Christian circles. So it says, this is the last paragraph of the first chapter. There's only 3 kind of main chapters or sections to The Abolition of Man. If you've never seen it before, this is said book. So, beginning, it says, and all the time, we continue to clamor for those very qualities we are rendering impossible. You can hardly open a periodical without coming across the statement that what our civilization needs is more drive, dynamism, or self-sacrifice, or creativity. In a sort of ghastly simplicity, we remove the organ and demand the function. We make men without chests and expect of them virtue and enterprise. We laugh at honor and are shocked to find traitors in our midst. We castrate and bid the geldings be fruitful. Sometimes, man, it's hard to read these British people because they say weird words like that. And it just trips me up because I'm not that bright. You know what I mean? And so you gotta give me a second there Whoa, had to drop the seat. So why do I love that? We castrate and then expect them to be fruitful. That's how I feel like it feels to be a man in today's world. Is you're constantly told, step back, we don't need you. Women can run this thing. You have the Homer Simpson effect, right? Where it's like men are dumb, dads are useless, all this kind of thing. And then you have a lot of great women in the church who say, no, we don't want that. We want you to be involved. We want to have you around. We value you. We need you. And then it's like, okay, you need us for what? And I think that a lot of times is the question that never really fully gets answered. And if it does get answered, it's vague. We need your strength. We need, I had an Instagram follower, somebody actually responded, I think in a sense with this kind of sentiment. And this isn't a criticism, because I don't think that this is wrong. But I think crossing the realm from the hypothetical, from the theoretical into the practical is where we are falling off, right? This is where I think this is the bridge. This is the area that is actually the problematic. So I asked the question, I think this gets tossed around a lot, but is rarely put in practical terms. If you believe that men are supposed to lead, tell me what that means to you. Shoot me a message. Would love to hear what you think it means, looks like for a man to lead his family. Somebody responded, this is a young married woman. She said, humble strength, decisiveness, confidence, strength to sacrifice and put family well-being above all earthly things, defense of family and faith, humility, all of this being done attempted through submission of it all to God rather than narcissism, power trip, etc. I love it. I think that that's true. I think that men have strength. I think the world needs men's strength. I think the world needs men's decisiveness. There's a lot there that I think is beautiful. What does it practically mean? You know, because this is where you get into these debates and these discussions where you have marriage podcasts or whatever different things try to decide like who gets the final say in a marriage. What does it look like for a man to lead? And I was listening to a different podcast today where it was talking about why we need a theology of masculinity. And this is something that I'm like actively working out. If I could someday write a masculine genius equivalent to the feminine genius from Lisa Cotter, you know, that would be my dream, right? I would love to do something like that. I think it would be absolutely amazing. I think it's necessary. I think it's very, very needed because we don't have anything like that for men. And you can't tell me that we don't need it, right? I mean, guys, men don't know how to be men. And this is a huge problem that we have. And so often when like with the podcast I was listening today, talking about it, we get into, again, describing what masculinity is not. And a lot of times what we tie in a lot of good things with some bad things in there when we like degrade, for example, the macho man, right? So when we're degrading the macho man, this, you know, societal kind of like the Andrew Tate view of like you're muscular, you have a lot of money, you're successful, women love you. We often will tie into that like being physically strong, feeling like you have to be protective or be able to defend your family, right? From a violent attack, not just spiritual attack. Obviously, it's primarily spiritual, but there's also a physical realm and reality of protecting your family. All of those kinds of things, right? So we tie up all of it together, even though there might be some goodness. I don't personally think that everything Andrew Tate ever said was false. I don't think that everything he says about men is false or masculinity. I think a lot of it's distorted and a lot of it's broken and a lot of it is straight up wrong, right? But I don't think all of it is. And so I think so often we just describe in a way to not be not inclusive, right? In an effort to be inclusive, we don't want to say that being masculinity is being able to bench 225 pounds. It's not having a beard. It's not making a lot of money, right? It's not being able to fix things with your hands. We talk about stuff like that. And we'll say that that's not what it really means to be a man. And instead, we try to make it seem like the battle is braiding your daughter's hair or painting fingernails and being able to explain and teach your sons how to like get in touch with their emotions so they can express their emotions in a healthy way. And I don't love it. You know, because I feel like it just comes up and it's like, yeah, remember everything that inspired you as a boy? Remember when you used to watch football games And even actors or movies or whatever it was that you were into, even if it was theater, right? You wanted to be great. You wanted to dare. You wanted to challenge yourself. You wanted to prove that you have what it takes. Instead of giving men the opportunity to prove that they have what it takes, and if they don't, forming them and shaping them and helping them get there, instead we just say, it doesn't matter if you have what it takes, because now all you have to do is feminine things, and you're going to be bad at those things anyways, right? We kind of laugh and like, it's just about trying to braid the hair. Sure, you're not going to be as good at it as your wife is. Sure, you're not going to paint the nails as good because she's been doing it her whole life, but you just try and you're just present and you're just fun and you're just like this guy that's there at home. You don't have to be a hero. You don't have to like do things well or excel at anything. And it's just kind of, to me, it's this like self-esteem generation thing. And I think that so many men, the men that speaks to, my fear is this, and this is where the shit gets spicy, I think, is that, in my opinion, we are not reaching very masculine men in the church. You don't have an abundance of what I consider to be strong masculine men. Now, what does that partially mean? I was thinking about it today. I was eating at Chick-fil-A, just eating lunch and reading some articles on marriage and masculinity, because this has kind of been my theme of late. When I think of kind of the epitome of a man, when I think of masculinity in my mind, this is just like opinion. This is me kind of opining. This is not me saying that this is the outline of what it means to be a man. But when I think in my mind, like, who are the most masculine men that I feel like I know? They are men that I would want to go to war with. And I think that deep down inside, all of us men want to be the type of man that someone would want to go to war with. We can get around women and say all these different things about like being a man is just about being emotional and being, in touch with your feelings and being able to, teach other people that, and painting nails and slumber parties and things. Like, you can say that, and there's a lot of women who will agree because they think that that's cute for the time being. That seems appealing because they're like, oh, you're like another girlfriend, but one that can help me procreate. And I don't think that's the long-term solution. I don't think that's what women ultimately want, and I don't think it's what men want. I think men want to be the type of men that another man, a masculine man, will want to go to war with. In this podcast, they were talking about Andrew Huberman, and Andrew Huberman is a psychologist, teaches at Stanford, and I've listened to a few of his things. Some of it's really great, some of it's really whack, because he's just super secular. It seems like he's on a journey, so I'm praying for him and hoping that he converts. But anyways, he described how when you're trying to motivate high school or college athletes, they're not motivated by the things that professional athletes do, not motivated by this or that. But what really motivates them is if you're like, this is what the Rangers do. This is what Navy SEALs do. This is what, Green Berets do. And having been in that world, right? I went to Ranger school, been to airborne school. I was a platoon leader in the infantry for a while. There's something about a man who would, this is going to sound crazy. This is the kind of shit that I feel like the Lord brings to me, and it's insane. And people in the Catholic world are like, what the hell are you talking about? I think that there's something to a man that I know would kill somebody who was threatening us, right? I'm not talking about some crazy bloodthirsty men. When I was in the Army, I experienced and I encountered those men who truly wanted to go to war because they wanted to kill people. It was kind of deranged. It was a little crazy. When you have to go to war, I would tell you it's not the least comforting thing to have them on your side versus the other side, because that's ultimately what war is. And war is ugly. And I talked about this even kind of when I talked about Israel and Hamas. It's just like, we don't like to acknowledge the fact that war is real and it exists and it's ugly, it's hideous. When it comes to protecting the family, this is the kind of stuff that I felt like I never was able to hear at men's conferences. Is, there was these questions on, I don't know if you've seen the like viral going around of asking moms if they would kill for their children. I think that, I don't know what the answer should be for moms. I think that for men, the answer should be a resounding yes. I think that if you were attacked, right, and somebody was trying to actually take your children, think about like wars, like this is happening in other countries. If they were to attack and try to take your wife and kids, or just trying to kill them, you have an obligation as a man to defend them. And that could mean killing another person, killing the man that is attacking you and trying to steal your wife and kids. There's a lot of, we've created a church in which we have a lot of men who would never want to do that. And I just think that from my experience, you're able to see that in a lot of men. You can kind of see it in your eyes. You can see it in the eyes of an initiated man. You can see it in the eyes of a man who's taking his responsibility seriously. And I don't think that by telling men, you don't have to be strong, you don't have to be this, you don't have to be that to be a man. You just have to be willing to braid hair and paint nails and wash the dishes or whatever it might be, these household chores, that can be a great part of being an amazing husband. Those things can be a good part of being a great father. When you get into like, what does it mean to be a great father? But more at the fundamental core of what it means to be a man, because being a man expands outside of being a husband and father, because it also applies to priests and it applies to single men, religious. Not only are you willing to kill, but you're also willing to die. And that's the other aspect of this. And there is something about building up virtue and dying to self through washing the dishes or doing laundry or whatever household tasks you might not enjoy doing, because you know that it needs to be done and you love your family more than you love watching football or playing video games or whatever your, habits might be. But there's something to being able to say, yeah, I'm willing to die for something. And I think that was one of the greatest things that I encountered and experienced in the military, was just being like, I mean, when you're loading up to go to Afghanistan, I remember landing, and I remember in our first few nights when we got to our base that we were operating out of in eastern Afghanistan, and there was a mortar attack, like, I don't know, 90 minutes after we got there. And we're like in the bunker, and we're just kind of looking at each other like, wow, like this is what it's like. Turns out this is what war is like. They're actually trying to kill us. And am I willing to actually die for this? And not a good time to ask the question. You should ask it beforehand. But you signed up and you're there, and you're kind of feeling ready for that, right? It's very sobering. But I think these are two huge parts of this. Are you willing to do the uncomfortable things? Are you willing to face your fears as a man, whatever those fears may be? For some of you, it might be praying out loud with your family. For some of you, it might be going to the gym and overcoming the fear for that. But to me, I've always kind of boiled down masculinity. What does it mean to be a man? I think it's all about mastering the skill and the talent and the virtue of doing the things you ought to do, whether or not you feel like doing them. If I could boil it down, it kind of comes down to the virtue of duty. A lot of tied in with that is discipline. Tied in with that is humility, because you rely on the Lord for the strength to do the things you ought to do, because if you ought to do them, God's going to give you the strength to do them. So these are some of the things that I think kind of boil it down to be on a practical level, doing the things you ought to do. That's still kind of theoretical. So getting into the weeds of it, I think that, because I don't want this to be a long episode, I want to write about this. I want to get really deep into this topic, but this is just kind of a little taster. To me, what does it mean to be a leader? Going back, this is a very military themed episode. In the military, the Ranger Creed. Someday, maybe my next episode will be breaking down the Ranger Creed and how that applies to us as men and as Catholics in general. In the Ranger Creed, just getting into the first stanza, it goes like this: recognizing that I volunteered as a ranger, fully knowing the hazards of my chosen profession, I will always endeavor to uphold the prestige, honor, and high spirited core of the Rangers. Acknowledging the fact that a ranger is a more elite soldier who arrives at the cutting edge of battle by land, sea, or air, I accept the fact that as a ranger, my country expects me to move further, faster, and fight harder than any other soldier. To me, that's what it means to be a man. When you are ranger qualified in an infantry unit, you are expected to be in shape. You are expected to know your shit. You're expected to know how to call for fire. You're expected to know all the details and things that you need to know as an infantry leader to go out there, execute, and to be the best. That's what it means to be a platoon leader, right? When you get there, you're supposed to be in the best shape. You're supposed to be knowledgeable of everything, of how everybody with their own specialty, you're supposed to have a general knowledge of how they're supposed to be doing that. To me, what does it mean to lead your family? It means to strive to be the best. If you're going to lead, you're supposed to lead from the front. Doesn't mean I have to be the best in everything. Emily knows more about theology than I do. But what it means is that I'm growing to learn more things. I'm growing so that when we are doing our Bible study together in the morning, right, when we're reading through scripture, maybe I read some commentary on it the night before. Maybe I read some commentary on it the morning before. Usually I'm up before her and I'm out there already with the Bible in hand. I'm picking the reading that we're going to go through. I'm leading us in prayer, opening us up closing us afterwards, asking her, like, what are your intentions? Is there anything you want to say to the Lord? Opening it up. Obviously, we can both pray. And sometimes she'll lead the prayer or whatever too. But generally, I created the structure for that. I make sure that we're getting that done. So number one, it's striving to be the best. It's striving to lead from the front. It's striving to say, okay, I need to have a strong prayer life if I'm going to expect my wife to have a good prayer life. I'm going to expect my kids to pray and want to go to mass. I need to be doing that. I need to be making sure that I'm going to daily mass as much as I can, or if I can, right? I need to make sure that I'm praying the rosary. I need to make sure that I'm studying. I need to make sure that I'm evangelizing. I need to make sure that I'm generous. All these things that I want my family to be, I take that leader mindset of saying, okay, one of my favorite army leader kind of maxims is your soldiers will do half of what you do right and twice what you do wrong. And so I try to think about that, especially with my kids, less so with my wife, because my wife is much more of a peer than, more of a platoon sergeant. I always say, if you're the platoon leader, kind of like your right-hand man, the platoon leader has the ultimate control, but the platoon sergeant is very, very influential, right? But if you have your privates and your specialists and things like that, they're going to do half of what you do right and double what you do wrong. I think that's true for your kids. And so it doesn't mean all of your past mistakes, but how I'm actively living, right? How I'm living this week. If I anticipate that my kids will do half of what I do right and double what I do wrong, what would their lives look like? That's what I think it means to be a leader. The second part of being a leader is taking extreme ownership, taking responsibility. Whether we make it to mass on time, whether our house is generally clean, whether or not we have enough money for what we're doing, whether or not we're spending our money well, if we're budgeting well. I can't be making excuses for that. As a man, it is my responsibility as the leader to take full responsibility and ownership over what happens in our family, the trajectory that we're going, because ultimately I'm held accountable for that. And so I have to take responsibility for that. Doesn't mean that I'm a dictator, doesn't mean I'm authoritarian, doesn't mean that I have to go around constantly saying, oh, I feel this or that. But I shouldn't in my best self be blaming my wife for why aren't we doing this, why aren't we doing that. I should be influencing, leading, motivating, giving direction to my family, to making sure that we're getting to those ends, those outcomes that me and my wife mutually agree upon, and the vision that I set for our family. So those, I think, are two of the most practical things that gets into, very day-to-day things, not just with your prayer, but also just the way you're living your life, right? Am I eating healthy? Am I overeating? Am I watching too much TV? Am I not going to bed on time so I get up on time? Am I snoozing my life away in the morning? Am I not reading? Am I half-assing it at my job, right? All of these different things, this is what it means to lead by example, right? And that's what seeking excellence is all about. I think I'm trying to get us away as a church, away from this idea of just saying what masculinity is not. As you've heard me say in the past, I'm okay if you're a man and you can't bench 300 pounds. I can't bench 300 pounds. If you can't back squat 225, whatever it is, I think that you should strive to be physically strong, so you need to be able to physically protect your family. I think that you should strive for physical excellence, mental excellence, all the different 7 pillars, right? Let's actually expect something of ourselves. Let's actually lay out some guidelines and some practical things that we can measure ourselves on, and expect that we can be the best. Expect that we can lead our families properly, right? That we can lead by example, that we can lead from the front, that we can take responsibility and ownership for the things happening in our house, cast a vision for what's supposed to be happening. And when we get off track from that, get us back on track and recognize that it's our fault that we get off in the first place, and try to learn from those mistakes and avoid making them again in the future. So like I said, I'm going to get, much deeper into these topics, but I encourage you men out there to do this. I encourage you women out there. What's the woman's role in all of that? When it comes to a man's masculinity, a woman can't make a man, a woman can't initiate a man, a woman can affirm and encourage a man. That is, I think, the role of women when it comes to a man's masculinity. I'm not specifically talking about the role in the family or in the church or any of that, but when it comes to helping your man be the best man that he can be, you encouraging him, you being the biggest cheerleader in his life, you explaining that you respect him, that you admire his hard work, the efforts he's putting in, all that kind of stuff. That's all it takes. We'll run through walls if you tell us those kinds of things, right? If you're willing to say, hey, I really admired this. I really loved how you worked hard on this, and this was the outcome. Or even though this didn't work out the way that we hoped, I really loved the way you put yourself all into it and you gave it your all, and you're willing to take risks and do what it takes for our family. Those kinds of things go a long way. And women often are not willing to say those types of things to their man. They want to love, I love you, kisses and all that kind of stuff like they want. That's what they give. But this is where you get the love and respect and the love languages and stuff like that, where men typically want to be respected more than they want to be loved. And when they have that, they're willing to love, and they're freed up in a sense. This goes both ways. But when men feel respected and they feel encouraged and supported, they're freed up in a sense. There's much less friction and obstacles in their way to loving the wife they want to be loved, and vice versa, right? When the husband is loving the wife, then it's much easier for them to respect. But I do think that the respect in that aspect of it is what's largely missing in a lot of relationships, because so many women have been brainwashed to not think that way. They think that they're supposed to love their husbands, and that's it. And it's just kind of this mutual love and submission, and we treat each other the same, and all this kind of stuff. And we're different. It's just a reality. Men and women are different. And so we're going to get deeper into this topic. Thanks for tuning in today. Share this with a man in your life. Help them to, understand some of the practical aspects of this. Comes down to leading by example and ownership. God bless you. Continue to fight hard. My boys out there, be your best. Women out there, be your best. Let's get to it. Let's get to work, baby. We got a lot of stuff to do. We got a lot of lies to fight against, a lot of, traps by the devil out there that are going to try to break up families and keep this tension and chasm between men and women. But we're figuring this thing out. We're going to get it together. All right. I'll see you next time.